they try to like make it
Yeah.
visible to like everybody that wants to see that, oh, we are like a country who actually did these things and we actually won, right?
Mm.
So you see like monuments commemorating, the
Okay.
victories everywhere. They have like a massive war museum, where they keep like the scraps of like the US weapons like outside. And,
Mm.
there's very huge like um chambers upstairs where you can see like all of the atrocities of the US and things. And they try to like say these things out loud.
Mm.
Like the entire streets are like filled with like hammer and sickle symbols, etc. Like you enter like a shop, the shop has like communist flags, all of
Mm.
those things. So like for me as a Nigerian, we're like, you just telling somebody that, oh, we shouldn't remove subsidy, they are starting to say that, oh, bro, you are what? Are you like the new Soviet Union or what? Where
Yeah.
those kind of things are like demonized. It felt
Yeah.
like very, very good for me. Like, bro, like, look at how you guys like just like normalized having like these things. Like, there's
Mm.
no, you're not looking funny, wearing like a hat and it has like the, communist star sign, all of
Yeah.
those things, you could see all of those things there. But the very huge contradiction was seeing all of those things and seeing how people revered all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? How they took it like very, very serious. And also on the other side, seeing like elements of like, of course, like Western capital infiltration in that
True.
particular society, right? So
Mm.
was, and this is like a very big question that I feel like leftists around the world are still like seeking to like answer. Some
Yeah.
feel like they've answered it, but some are still like very skeptical about like the kind of answers they want to give to those kind of like scenarios, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like where do we resolve this very big issue of state capitalism, state control,
Yeah.
infiltration of like Western capital into like traditionally communist or socialist societies, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
all of those things were like creating like this kind of contradiction in my head about like
Mm.
you literally will be in front of like a mall that has like so many products, all of these, name them, all of these
Mm.
products like Starbucks, etc., etc. But like in the front of the mall is this one massive, Ho Chi Minh billboard,
Yeah.
commemorating the guy, and some very massive hammer and sickle insignia, right beside it, and
Mm.
some very nice, Vietnamese writing that probably will mean chanting to the guy, and there's this very big reverence for like the state, and like respect the state, follow the state, be
Yeah.
loyal to the, be loyal to the party, etc., etc. Those kind of things.
Today we're joined by Taofeek, who's a Nigerian
Yeah.
leftist based in Lagos, although he wouldn't necessarily call himself a Lagos boy, but that can be debated later on. Um, and who, amongst other very relevant qualifications, has made a recent sojourn of sorts to Vietnam, which will be the subject of discussion today, but I'm sure there will be other areas of mutual interest that emerge in the conversation. Taufik, glad to have you on.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. It's very good to be here finally. We actually postponed this like twice, so I'm very glad to be here. Can't wait to share all of the experiences with you guys.
No, it's good. It's great to have you. I mean, we're fans. So listen, we have a couple of questions pertaining to the trip, but before we get to that, we thought we'd just get to know you a little bit. So, would you like to introduce yourself a little more than the few lines I just read out, and maybe talk a bit about, how you've somehow found yourself interested in or engaged in revolutionary and left politics as well?
Oh yes, definitely. This is a very interesting part of my life. So I like to talk about it all the time.
Okay.
So I I attended like an all boarding secondary school. My name is Taofeek, by the way, Taofeek Sharai. I'm from Ogun State. Uh, I I work. I run like a business, and I also work. So right now I'm a student. Trying to like
Mm,
pursue like a master's degree. So I attended like a boarding school in Ijebu. It's not Ijebu. It's on the outskirts of like Ijebu. So at my boarding school, we have like a reading session like every year. Sorry, every term. So after
Mm,
like the term when like exams are like concluded, like those very short days before your parents comes to pick you, before you go home, you have like an intense like reading session.
mm,
So this is like me in just one, just two, right? So and these are like so many books, like you can read any book. So all you just have to do is like read a book because you most likely will be asked about the book. So the book I read, the book I saw at that particular time was actually Communist Manifesto. But this is
mm,
a just two boy trying to like read Communist Manifesto. Of course, it
mm.
doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. So, but I tried reading the book and I tried making meaning out of the book at that particular time. But I'm not going to lie to you, it didn't make sense. And
Mm,
I didn't finish reading the book. But I would say that was like my first intro into trying to like study the world beyond, what I was, experienced to,
mm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
But going on, my school was like actually very, very, because I'm actually Muslim and the school is like a Muslim school
Okay.
and they were like very, very vocal about like the Israel-Palestinian issue, right? And they tried to like teach us, right? Because at that particular point in time, there wasn't so many Nigerians who were actually talking about it. So
Mm,
they tried to like teach us what was going on there, because this is a boarding school where you have like, uh, every Friday or so, we have like a session where we talk about like the news, like we talk about things going on in the world, right?
okay.
So part of the things they used to talk out to us about was like the ongoing conflict in Palestine, in Afghanistan, in Iraq,
Mm,
all of those things, right? But it was largely from like a Muslim perspective, right? So it
mm,
wasn't from like a more materialistic or a more colonialist, etc. perspective. So so they would tell us about like the Nakba. They would tell us about like the refugees, etc.,
mm,
etc. All of those things, right? So it was very interesting to hear, and
yeah.
we would go to read about all of those things, and we were beginning to like form some sort of like politics, right? Very very staunch
Yeah.
pro-Palestinian politics at that particular point in time. So
Kind of
going
amazing now
from
for secondary school.
what do you
Yeah.
say?
I said no, that's kind of amazing now for
Oh
like
yeah, it's actually very. I mean,
secondary
like
school. It's
when I talk
crazy.
to
Yeah.
my friends about it, like that's what we did in my secondary school. They are like, "Wow, like bro,
That's
you
nuts.
don't want to know where we were doing at my own secondary school." So it was kind of like
Yeah.
very. It was very very interesting to actually take all of those knowledge at that time. But that one
Yeah.
went by so fast, and I graduated school, and I because of that particular introduction, I also started like getting myself involved in like reading and all of these things. So I'm actually a very very curious person. But the curiosity actually led me into, trying to like gain more knowledge with regards to how the world works, right? So
Mm,
at that time, and in school that time, when we were doing like the news, it was more of like the principal of the school allowing us watch like Al Jazeera. Like that was the channel that we used to watch. I can remember very, very well.
oh my
So
God.
all of us developed like a love for Al Jazeera at that time. So when we go back
Mm,
home to like our houses, we were like tuning into Al Jazeera and try to like watch, right?
mm,
So because it was like a very big thing, if they were talking about something and they asked like the crowd and you could like answer and you had like an idea of what they were talking about, right?
yeah.
So everybody wanted to like catch up, wanted to like play catch up. So when I got back home, it was me just like watching Al Jazeera, etc. And Al Jazeera was like very, very big, talking about like all of these things, talking about, you know, uh, they did like so many documentaries. So there was
Oh,
this particular documentary that I saw on Al Jazeera. The name of the documentary was Secret of the Seven Sisters, right?
okay.
The documentary is literally about like oil and how like
Mm,
the
mm-hmm,
petrodollar is about the petrodollar industry, how oil works in the world generally. They talk about like the Middle East, you can't talk about like oil without talking about like the Middle East extensively. They talk
mm,
about like the Middle East extensively, talk about what's going on, how the US leverages its power, the hegemony of the US, etc. They also come to like Africa, talk about like places like Gabon, like all of the oil producing countries in Gabon, and they talk about like the French influence,
mm,
about how like most of these resources are like exploited by like the French, etc. Talk about like Nigeria as well, British, etc. So
mm,
when I started like picking all of these things around, I'm like, okay, there must be something around all of these things. Like these are supposed to be the good guys. Why is it that
mm.
in every narrative that I kind of like hear, they are always like on the wrong side of things. You get so it was that inquisitive for me. So when I now got into like uni, I actually studied English for my undergraduate degree. So when I studied English for my undergraduate degree, there were books that were like prescribed to us that I had to like read. Part of those
Mm.
books was books written by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I don't know if you guys know him.
Yeah, for
He's a
sure.
Kenyan writer, but he's also a Kenyan Marxist. He's a Kenyan Marxist writer.
Mm.
So the guy's like very, very big, literary icon on the continent right now. He's quite
Mm.
old right now, but it was still like very, it wasn't that old then. He's quite old right now. So I read a book. I read two of his books.
Was that decolonizing the mind?
Not decolonizing. Those are like fiction, like
Okay.
Okay, okay,
like
okay.
literary fiction. But this is
Oh.
literally fiction that's like literally very, very revolutionary. So
Yeah,
I can't
sure.
even like the title of the book right now. I'm trying to like, I'm trying to like scan my head for the title of the book right now. So I read like
Mm.
Ngugi's books, and like all of the dots started like connecting, right?
Mm.
All of the dots started connecting. And this was at the time that I was staunchly like very, very pro Obama, by the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this is like a guy, like a black guy that has been made president in a very racial society,
Oh
it
no,
was
no, no,
very,
relatable. Huh? Don't feel
yeah,
shy.
like very
Yeah,
relatable story, and again, there was
yeah,
this fanfare around like the entire Obama thing at that particular time, right? So
yeah.
it was very, very big, right? It was very, very big. But like my idea started shifting. My idea started shifting, and I started reading that book. I was like, okay. Like I started reading all of these things. And
Mm.
when Obama's term actually finished and Donald Trump won, so if you go to like my Instagram, like I just leave it there so it looks like so that I can look at like my old self and just laugh. So I write like this expose about like Obama, right? So and I talk about like things he didn't do that he promised to do. So I was like, oh bro, you said you were going to resolve the Palestinian issue, you didn't. You said you were going to, racial equality and things, you didn't. You said you were going to do this and that, you didn't. Like so many things you didn't do. You went to drop bombs on like an hospital in Afghanistan. Why would you do that kind of thing? Like I was tagging him and saying all of this is by the way. So it was like very,
Yes.
very, it was very, very like silly. I was just like very, very pure in like my politics.
Yeah. Ernest.
So moving on from there, I now started like reading, right? I now started like reading, started like reading Kwame Nkrumah's works, and I've got like this extensive, amount of like drive from one of my friends that had like so many works. I started watching videos of like this guy, this Burkina Faso guy,
Sankara.
Sankara.
and like develop like Marxist leanings, right? So and I
Mm.
started like looking at everything from like very, very materialistic perspective, started like being a lot more dialectics about like how to like analyze all of these things. So it's a
Mm.
very, very long journey actually. Like this is I just like thought about like me from 2008, right, to almost
Mm.
like 2016, right? So it was a very, very long journey to like come into this
Mm-hmm.
particular point and say, "Look, guys, the only way for us to achieve anything is not by this with these guys. We have to actually, be very, very dialectic in the way we like analyze things, right? So
Mm.
it's been like a very, very long journey for me,
Yeah.
honestly, coming to this particular point.
Yeah.
And I've also had to like deal with like a lot of what do you call it? A lot of for myself internally, like internal what do you call it? When things
Contradictions.
conflict themselves, yeah, contradictions, yeah, you get it. That's the word. Like internal contradictions with myself, right? So I'm like, okay, if this is this, then where do I stand? Like, where do like where do
I
I
know,
fit in? Like these are like things that are still like bother me to today, right?
for
Like I want
sure.
to do certain things. I'm like, okay, where do I stand? Like, it's like my own self policing mechanism, honestly.
Mm.
So yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the very rough story of how I started like developing leftist politics.
Fair enough. No, it tends to be a long and windy journey.
Mhm.
Yes, and also the Obama experience of radicalization is one I'm sure a lot of younger millennials and below, let's say, might share, where this sort of dashed expectations
Oh
leading
yeah.
to looking for something a
Every,
little
everyone fell for the bait that
exactly,
time.
exactly, but then falling and then realizing, Maybe
Yeah.
you need something a little stiffer than what they were serving at the time. Um, so that's cool. So then, that kind of sets the context for this big sojourn of yours. But yeah, just to get into it on a lighter note, I guess the question would be, what took you to Vietnam? Was it straight politics or a bit of pleasure? A mix of both. And I mean, what were your impressions from a kind of shopping life standpoint? Like, is Vietnam a nice place to vacation type thing? To the extent that pleasure was
Uh,
part of the trip.
uh, Oh yeah, it is actually for all of these reasons. So let me
Okay.
just give you a backstory of how like I ended up in Vietnam, right? So I have like this friend. We are like very, very we're always like, oh, see guys, let's like always plan like trips. Let's go somewhere, let's go like see the world, etc. So, and the thing is that if you're traveling as a Nigerian, you have to like calculate very well because you're not traveling like you have like a British or American passport. So
Mm,
so there was this particular time I went to Ghana and I met this Ghanaian leftist, is my very
mm,
good friend on Twitter. So we were just hanging out for like 3 days in Ghana. So I went there for a wedding actually. So after
mm,
like the wedding, I just like linked up with him and I was like, oh bro, like I'm in your city. Let's hang out. I try to like do that anytime I'm in like a space and Twitter is like a very big community for me. Like I literally know so many people from like so many parts of the world via
mm.
just Twitter. So if I'm going anywhere, I'm just like, okay, bro, I'm coming to your city, I'm coming to your country. Let's like
Nice.
link up. And I try to like do it all the time, like meet other leftists in like other parts of the world. So there was
No, sounds cool.
a particular time I went to Kenya as well. So I met like some Kenyan leftists, even like people who were like members of like the Kenyan Communist Party. Like I met them and we had like a very good chat. We're just talking about like things general.
Hmm.
So I now told my guy that this is actually very very nice because Vietnam is definitely on my bucket list in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And, I want to visit like countries that have that kind of history, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, wow, so you're taking me to Uncle Who's country. I'm like, I don't have a choice. I'm definitely following Uncle Who's country. So, and for him, it was more of like the tourist side. So it was like, see, bro, like we'll visit this place, we'll visit this place. And I tell him, I said, bro, don't worry. Like me, we'll visit all of these places, but me, I also want to visit for these other reasons, like to see some other things and to, just feel good about like saying, oh, I've been to Uncle Who's country, like I've been to Ho Chi Minh, like I've been to the
Hmm.
country where they literally named the city after a guy after winning, a war.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so this is what's gonna take us to. But before we went there, I was trying to like make my findings about like possible things I could like do there and things that I could like look out for. Right. So
Yeah.
those were like the things that actually informed like my trip, right? So because I tell the guys all the time, like even like my friends on like communist leftist Marxist Twitter, I'm like, see, bro, I feel like we should actually take it like as a duty if we can, obviously, if we can, as a duty as
Mm,
like companies to like visit places where communism or like socialism has been implemented, even if they
mm,
like failed or they like succeeded, like it's very, very good to like learn from your experience and try to like
mm,
see those places and let people know that there's not like first try to like debunk most of like things that you see on like propaganda, social media, etc. About like the people who live in these spaces. And I just feel like it's like a very, very feel good moment for anybody who claims to actually like this kind of politics to also
mm.
like want to associate himself with those kinds of like travels. Right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was it largely. It was
Okay.
driven by like ideology and also like just the enthusiasm, honestly.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And then speaking about the ideological aspect, what struck you as some of the socialistic components of Vietnamese society? Or, I mean, I guess to frame it as maybe less leading, were there socialistic components still lingering in Vietnamese society from your point of view?
So when I got to Vietnam, right? So I was of course when you go to somewhere and you're like very, very keen on seeing certain things, so you can at
Yeah.
least use them to at least make a point. So because myself and my friend, we had like this very long debate about like this thing. Like literally because the flight was
Okay.
like 9 hours, right? So nine like this is like 9 hours from like Ethiopia. we went via like Ethiopian Air. So
Okay.
we were like in this very, very long debate. And I was like, see, bro, he was asking me, he asked me a question and it was like, do I still think like all of these countries are still, because he is not like leftist, no, but
Okay.
he's like very, very, he asked me questions and things. So
Okay.
and
Open-minded
I was like,
person.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, see, bro, when you get to these countries, first, how they organize like their society is what's going to determine if, they are still like on the line or they are partially on the line or they are not on the line anymore. It's
Mm.
that, right? Say, and I'll say like, how like a country that fought like a war against like multiple invaders, because like Vietnam happens to, they fought the war against the French, they fought the war against like the US, right?
Mm.
And they also had like a time where they had like Japanese occupation or Chinese occupation, one of both. I think it's
Mm.
Japanese occupation. So they have like this very long history against like fighting people who were trying to like colonize them at a particular point in time. And I was
Mm.
like, bro, like this is how we actually have to engage, how they organize like their society. So when we got there, when we got to Vietnam, we actually, because there's this thing about like people when they go when they're like touring like an area,
Mm.
they get so comfortable in the city areas that, and the city areas do not necessarily speak towards like a lot of things. Like
Mm.
city areas are literally built to be very touristy, because these
Sure.
countries, all of these businesses that are in the city areas rely on this tourism for them to actually make ends meet. So there are so many touristy things in the city, right? All these
Yeah.
cute cafe shops, all these very cute, malls, things
Yeah.
that definitely will want to like make you want to come back, or things
But
that are like very appealing aesthetically. So I
but
feel
is it
like
like
even to like,
international brands like Zara and H&M, or the
oh
kind
yeah,
of classic
definitely,
clothes?
definitely,
Okay.
like
Okay.
Vietnam is
Starbucks.
like, Vietnam is a global hub for clothing. Like they,
Okay.
they do so much clothing there. So you'll see all of those things like when you just go to like their malls and things. So you
Right.
see all of those things. But like
Okay. Okay.
some things stood out for me. Something stood out for me, right? So I took like because I visited both Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. These are like the two
Mm.
biggest cities. Like I spent like a week in both, like a week in Ho Chi Minh, a week in Hanoi.
Mm.
So, but I went to Hanoi first. So I was in Hanoi. Then I took like a 3-hour trip outside of Hanoi. I went to a place called Ninh Binh. So
Okay.
uh, Ninh Binh is like more of like a countryside. It's
Mm.
more very rural. It has like all of these very nice hills, very nice villages and stuff. So
Okay.
what you will see in all of these areas are like housing. So this
Mm.
housing, they have like these massive banners that what they wrote there is not in English, right? But
Mm.
beside this banner is you have like the communist hammer and sickle symbol. Then you
Mm-hmm.
have like the Vietnamese star flag, right? So
Nice.
behind
Yeah.
like this very big banner is like massive housing
Mm.
projects, which is because of like the banner and the state symbols. You definitely know this is like social housing, and it's
Sure.
like something built by like the state.
Mm.
You see like these things, and you see like so many people, because Vietnam also has like very large population considering the kind of like area that they occupy. You see
Mm.
like so many people who actually occupy those spaces, right? And you see how they are like very, very intentional about like not necessarily concentrating development in the cities. The cities are also like pretty
Mm.
developed, right? Very,
Mm.
very developed. Like I feel like these guys are literally in the future, right?
Mm.
So you see like very, very conscious effort to actually like develop those areas. It's the
Mm.
the inner areas where you necessarily wouldn't care about, right? So you go to those areas and you see what's thriving there.
Mm.
So you just see like the obvious, and then you get to some place. There was this particular funny thing that happened, right? So our
Okay.
hotel, our hotel was right in front of like a party secretariat. So the party secretariat is like the party secretariat for that particular. I don't know, maybe it's that particular area. I don't know how they divide
Sure.
like their own. Maybe it's local government, or I don't
Yeah.
know how they divide the authority, right? So,
Okay.
but like the hotel is right in front of it. Like we
Mm.
see, like I had to like take a picture of that banner, then like translate that banner. and it literally
Okay.
translated into like party secretariat. Because every
Okay.
evening you see like people wearing like khaki dresses and stuff in like their
Mm.
large numbers. You come there. These are like people. You know that they are not like, this is not like their full-time job, right?
Yeah.
They're actually coming from like different human
Mm.
endeavors, just coming there in like the evening,
Mm-hmm.
sitting down, just entering the space and having like a chit chat. So on the final day that we're actually coming back home, trying to like catch our flight,
Yeah.
we're having a very, very big party meeting. So they now blocked off the main road. They blocked off the
Mm.
main road, like policemen on the main road, and
Mm-hmm.
like they blocked like the two access into like the road, right? And they
Okay.
were having like this massive meeting right on the road, right? So many people, like so many
Mm.
people who were like party stalwarts, all those things. Like it literally felt like a scene, the equivalent of that kind of scene was in Nigeria when like a politician comes and they want to like share money and you like so many people coming
Yeah.
to like want to come and get like their own share, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So we now
Yeah.
came out and like, oh, like because we ordered like a cab to take us to the
Mm.
airport. So the cab guy was like, oh, I can't enter your street because they are doing like a party meeting there. So you have
Mm.
to like walk outside of the street and come and meet me where I am. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
so like everybody adhered to the fact that, oh, a party meeting is going on. You cannot disrupt it. Right?
Mm.
Like you cannot disrupt it. Like nobody was even trying to like be funny and say I want to enter or I want to not. You can't do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nobody was trying to like do that kind of thing. So
Right.
that was something that I saw as well. And again, there was this sense of like, there was this very huge sense of like camaraderie there, right? Because
Mm.
Vietnam has, of course, the kind of history that they have with the wars and things. And they try to like commemorate, like they try to like make it
Yeah.
visible to like everybody that wants to see that, oh, we are like a country who actually did these things and we actually won, right?
Mm.
So you see like monuments commemorating, the
Okay.
victories everywhere. They have like a massive war museum, where they keep like the scraps of like the US weapons like outside. And
Mm.
there's very huge like um chambers upstairs where you can see like all of the atrocities of the US and things. And they try to like say these things out loud.
Mm.
Like the entire streets are like filled with like hammer and sickle symbols, etc. Like you enter like a shop, the shop has like communist flags, all of
Mm.
those things. So like for me as a Nigerian, we're like, you just telling somebody that, oh, we shouldn't remove subsidy, they are starting to say that, oh, bro, you are what? Are you like the new Soviet Union or what? Where
Yeah.
those kind of things are like demonized. It felt
Yeah.
like very, very good for me. Like, bro, like, you know how you guys like just like normalized having like these things. Like, there's
Mm.
no, you're not looking funny, wearing like a hat and it has like the, communist star sign, all of
Yeah.
those things, you could see all of those things there. But the very huge contradiction was seeing all of those things and seeing how people revered all of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
How they took it like very, very serious. And also on the other side, seeing like elements of like, of course, like Western capital infiltration in that
Right.
particular society, right? So
Mm.
was, and this is like a very big question that I feel like leftists around the world are still like seeking to like answer. Some
Yeah.
feel like they've answered it, but some are still like very skeptical about like the kind of answers they want to give to those kind of like scenarios, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like where do we resolve this very big issue of state capitalism, state control,
Yeah.
infiltration of like Western capital into like traditionally communist or socialist societies, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
all of those things were like creating like this kind of contradiction in my head about like
Mm.
you literally will be in front of like a mall that has like so many products, all of these, name them, all of these
Mm.
products like Starbucks, etc., etc. But like in the front of the mall is this one massive, Ho Chi Minh
Mm-hmm.
billboard,
Yeah.
commemorating the guy, and some very massive hammer and sickle insignia, right beside it, and
Mm.
some very nice, Vietnamese writing that probably will mean chanting to the guy, and there's this very big reverence for like the state, and like respect the state, follow the state, be
Yeah.
loyal to the be loyal to the party, etc., etc. Those kind of things, right? So
Mm.
they are very big about like that particular side of their history, right? They
Yeah.
they take it like very, very serious. and it was very, very good to see how, they weren't trying to like be, they were not, I wouldn't say like trying to like hide it because I don't
Yeah.
think anything is needed. But it was all in your face. You could literally see it, right?
Yeah.
That oh, like this is what we do here. We're like a very socialist republic, and this is how we go about our things. So I was having like a conversation. Let me just finish with this lastly before we go like next item. So I was having like a
Mm,
conversation with like a local Vietnamese guy, and I was asking him about like how does it run here? How does the politics thing go here, etc. So because when we were like entering the country, one of the things that he will tell you is that you shouldn't criticize like the country openly, all these things. So you
mm.
want to be very, very careful who you talk to.
Okay.
You get so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh
like
no. So that's it. Yeah.
yeah. So I
No.
was I was
Yeah.
having, I was, I was having like a conversation with him. I was like, oh, like in Africa we don't have like all of these things. And it was like,
Right.
oh, here they are like very, very big, And it was giving me like how like the things ran and how there are certain things you can't do. And
Mm,
the kind of like social programs that they have, especially for like the young people, right? So saying, oh, they want to like revitalize like farming. So they take like people, they say, oh, members of like the party, they want to do these things that
mm,
the leadership thing is like very, very local. Like so like
mm,
local entities could take like decisions, right? And the central body didn't have to like even do anything about it. So the
mm,
extent to which they followed the communist leanings was entirely dependent on how much the local authority wanted to like implement it, right? So
mm. Interesting.
if you were living in a, let's say, a city, for example, where they were like ultra leftists, then bruh, like you have to do it. But you were,
Mm,
the very particular thing about like these kinds of country is the presence of like people who are also like very reactionary forces within the ranks of
mm-hmm.
like the party, and this is something you can't take away. So depending on where you are, the kind of politics that is like played is what is represented in like the local polity of like the particular area. So
Mm-hmm.
that was why we saw more of like party leanings and people trying to like be a lot more camaraderie out in the more rural areas than even in the city. Because I felt like the
Okay.
cities were like really, really infected. Everybody was like
Okay.
trying to like get the bag, etc. So yeah, that was
Right.
it. Yeah.
Interesting. No, we'll definitely come back to the question of geography, urban rural thing. That's very fascinating. Note, as is the, yeah, your narration of the kind of contradiction of the global market and, like particular expression of communism, which, yeah, you're right, is a question that lots of us are grappling with. So fascinating to get the everyday and lived experience of the mall and the Ho Chi Minh poster. That's fascinating. But you're talking about I'm bringing up the question of like how Africans go about social order and having a Vietnamese person respond to that, which leads me to wonder um, what the reception of Africa, what how you guys felt in terms of how you were received as Africans or people of color in Vietnam, which like is a question to do with travel. It's like is Vietnam the sort of place where you can go as a Nigerian or African person and not feel too kind of um, too much like an outsider or too sort of gawked at. But it's also a question about ideology to some extent, right? That like, is there sort of third world or anti-imperial kind of global South solidarity thing that still lingers? So we
Oh,
have time
okay.
for some of the other conversations. But yeah, I just wonder what the vibe was like as an African.
Oh yeah, like this is something I actually like to talk about as well. The kind of like
Okay.
reception that we got when we got there, because Vietnam is not a place where you find like so many people of color, so many like black people, for example, especially like African people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Practically didn't see any African. I saw black people. I
Okay.
saw like five black people. Okay,
Probably
no,
American or
I saw one like two Nigerians in Hanoi. I
yeah.
saw like two
Nah,
Nigerians in Hanoi. I was like very
they
surprised.
they would have, but they would have to be Nigerians there, yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
they were Nigerians.
but the other black
Nigeria.
people you saw, where do you reckon they're from?
They were from the US and Canada.
Ah, okay, okay, Americans,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Yeah.
so when I got there, we I didn't really see so many black people. I saw like the first set of black people that I saw, like two of them. So then when I went to like a tour of like some cave, and they were like there too, and we're like, "Oh, brother,
Mm.
like you've been looking for us, right?" I'm like, "Wow, I've been looking for you too." So because we
Yeah.
were three that went there, like it was me, like my brother, and then that my friend. So it was just like the three of us, three three musketeers, just
Yeah.
running around, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this is not a place where you find like so many black people, right? It's like
True.
very, very far away from like Africa, obviously, and also like very far away from like every part of the world. So it's not like, and it's not like a travel destination for so many black people. Um,
Mm.
so that was the first realization that we had to like come to terms with. And but the reception was not. They were very inquisitive people, inquisitive in the sense that when they see you, they obviously want to have like a very quick chat with you with regards to where you're from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anytime we say, "Oh, we're from Nigeria," oh, they say, "Oh, Nigeria." Like I'm like, "Yeah, okay, if you call it that, if you call it that, if you call it that," I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, they're from Nigeria." So most of them, um, it's either two things. So you either get like a what do you call it? A reference to maybe like football or something,
Mm-hmm.
or you get like the question of, oh, where is Nigeria? Where is Nigeria? Like, where is
Okay.
Nigeria? And they want to like make you like explain, some more about like what's happening there, and what's
Okay.
going on there with regards to just like how's life there generally. That's what they want to know.
Mm.
But at the bottom of like their curiosity as well was, we had like very funny experiences, right? This particular funny experience that we had, there was this place we went to eat, like a restaurant. So we entered like the restaurant to eat, and we sat down, getting comfortable and trying to like order our food and things. So when we were done ordering like the food, the owner of like the restaurant, the man literally had to go bring like two of his kids and say, "Oh, come and greet them. Like the black people are here. Come and greet them." That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
very fun
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Like they were like, it was like, ah, wow, like this is a very big thing for us, and come and
Yeah.
greet them. The the the, the black people are here, so come and greet them. I'm
Yeah.
like, it was very funny, and that was not like the only. And that was not like the only time. There was this particular club we went to in
Yeah.
Ho Chi Minh. So like the club literally wanted to like get us to like do interviews. They were taking pictures of
Interviews.
us. Yeah, like we did like interview. Like, and
Yeah.
when I came back, and this was the club we went to the night before we came back to Nigeria. So when we came back to Nigeria, my friend just sent me like Instagram, and these guys already like posted on their Instagram. I was like, "Oh, we have
So
we have we have we have
yeah.
made your diversity quota for the year. Don't worry."
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So we might be talking to one of the most famous Nigerians in Vietnam
Oh,
right
in
now.
Vietnam
By
right
these
now,
Yeah.
honestly,
conversations.
like you guys are like very, very keen on like posting out. So aside that, these guys were there was a particular the guy I was talking to that I was really talking, politics to, because what
Yeah.
I noticed is that I don't think Vietnamese people would readily ask you anything about like politics except maybe you bring it up.
Okay.
And yeah, because first there's a very, very huge language barrier. They don't speak that much English.
Yeah.
So
Sure. Sure.
you want to have a conversation with anybody, they at least must know like some English, or you want to go through the odious, route
Yeah.
of translating and using your phone, Google Translate and things. So, and that's like a
Mm.
longer. So most of them they really won't ask you. They will ask you like some other things, quick things,
Yeah.
uh, because that's like a full blown conversation. They most likely will ask you. But of course, if you talk to them, they want to like. So the guy I was talking to with regards to politics and things, he was like very keen on knowing like what was going on in the African continent. And he was like, see, like the first question he asked me was, "Oh, like I see that you guys produce so much oil. So
Mm.
how come you guys don't have like all of these things, you don't have this, you don't have that." So I was trying to
Yeah.
like explain to the guy like that's like layers and layers and layers of like so many problems that I can't even exhaust like the explanation right now.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that they hear like so many things here, and because they're not like an oil producing country, so
Sure.
there are certain things that you hear as a Nigerian that you feel like, wow, this is bad news, but for them it's like very good news, right? So for a Nigerian, for example, if you hear like oil prices are like going down, oh, like
Mm.
we're not earning so much. But for a
Yeah.
Vietnamese, if they hear like oil prices are like going down, it most likely means they'll be buying fuel for like lesser prices because they don't produce any oil, so they're literally praying
Yeah.
for like prices to like go down, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, oh, like he hears like all of those things. He reads like the OPEC thing, and he sees like how we're not doing very very well, how like there's so many things. He knew about like the election that we had, and he was thinking, he was asking me about like the ideological standpoint of like the new leader, like that's like Tinubu. I was like, bro, like just you don't just forget that
Don't go
guy.
there, man.
Don't go. I was like, oh, nah, like, nah, don't go there. Like, and I
Yeah.
told him that, and I told him like, you have like so many leaders, right? And that you might know even some of them but we don't have like those kind of people that you're asking me about, like those kind of people that you want to be happy to like hear about. I don't think we have them, right? Because the thing about Vietnam is, as much as they are like also like a very socialist country, they are also like in very huge competition with like China, right? Because
Mm.
China is right on their border, right? So they compete for like so many things. So they also compete for like FDI, right? So they are trying to
Yeah.
like compete for who gets the most money from like Western capitalists who are willing to like spend. So because this is a country that is just 1 hour away from like Singapore, which is a very fake country that is like an outpost of the West. So also very close to like countries like South Korea and Taiwan, Hong Kong, all of these places where like Western countries use as like their own outpost for like investment, right? So
Mm.
they are trying to like do all of these things, trying to like get like all of this money. And he was talking to me about like the current government plan, which is like a 5 city plan. So they
Mm.
see that there's not so much development going on outside of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh. So the government now instituted like a 10-year or 20-year plan to also bring in 3 other cities into that kind of like development. So because in Southeast Asia, Vietnam is still like the underdog somewhat.
Mm.
um yeah, of course they have like their own categorization of who is like the big guns and stuff, because when I met like a couple of like Hong Kongers and they were like, oh, this is the trenches.
Right.
Right? Like
Okay.
me, I was getting
Yeah.
excited about like, I was like, wow, you guys are living in the future here. Look at how
Yeah.
neat, look at how fine everything is. And I was talking to these Hong Kongers and Singaporean guys because like on my flight to Vietnam, I went with like Ethiopian Air, but Ethiopian Air doesn't fly to Hanoi. So what they would do is that they would drop you in Singapore, then you join like a connecting flight from Singapore on Singaporean airline to Hanoi. So I met like a
Right.
couple of Singaporean guys, and I was like speaking to this guy, and I was like, oh, like, this is the trenches. That was the summary of the entire thing that he was talking about. Because obviously, for somebody living in Singapore, Vietnam looks like, oh, I'm moving back.
Yeah. Sure.
That kind of
Sure.
thing.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So it was
Okay.
that kind of it was so they had like this plan, and he was now asking me if we have like something like that here. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, nah, we don't. Like
No. No. No.
we're just running with vibes here.
Yeah.
And he now said something. It was not like here that if government doesn't look at something, they won't look at it. But if they
Mm.
look at something and they want to actually achieve something, that they would achieve it like diligently. So, and it was like, this is how they actually run things. If
Mm.
something is not in the plan, if there is a plan, let's say we have like a 20-year plan, and you're not lucky enough to be part of that particular plan, you might find it very, very hard to like actually make your voices heard, right?
Mm.
But if you are in that plan, you are in for a good time.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
So
Right.
it was very, very, and it was very, and the way he talked about it was the way he talked about it was because like there are certain areas of like Vietnamese society where there is still like lack of development and they're still trying to like struggle with like things.
Sure.
But you get to like certain areas and you know that okay, you guys are literally the ones enjoying like government planning. You
Mm.
get so
Yeah.
because they are very, very particular about like how they plan. And he was talking about how meticulous this planning is, right?
Mm.
Where they want to situate like industrial areas, where they want to do this. And Vietnamese is like very, very industrial, like you have like very large industrial base, because of like proximity to China, etc., and very close competition with China. So they have like niche industries where they're actually leading, things like textile. You have like they're also into like microchip production now and things. So
Okay.
it's very, very good. It's very, very good there with regards to like industrialization, right?
That's
And I was
interesting.
asking,
Yeah.
yeah, I was asking what kind of strides that we were making here. I said, oh no, like we don't do any of that here. That he was, and the very big thing about like this thing, he was not asking about like the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and how
Okay.
Nigerians see it, right? How we like seeing it. He wasn't even asking about like Nigeria, how we see it on like the African continent. And I was not like, oh, the reactions are like very, very mixed.
Yeah.
To a very large extent, we see like what they are doing, but also there's like a very huge skepticism about like what they are doing, particularly because of infiltration of like propaganda from like the West, trying to like argue to us that this thing is like the new form of like colonialism. And I talked to him about how like, in here, people will revere like this kind of like news. So it's very, very difficult to like convince them. So
Yeah.
my interaction with like the few ones that I could literally talk to with like my Black experience and like African and Nigerian experience, it was more of them trying, because they don't know so much about here. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't know so much. They don't know so much at all. Like there's a very huge information gap. Very, very
Right.
huge information gap. They don't know so much about like this area. They're a lot more obsessed with like their own geopolitical area, what's going
Sure.
on in the Southeast Asia, what's going on with like US and like China, what's going on
Sure.
with like Japan, etc. Everybody hates
Yeah.
Japan in
Yeah.
that area. So there's a very huge
Yeah.
consensus. We
Interesting.
hate, we hate this guy.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so yeah, that's
Wow.
it.
Okay. No, but yeah, it's not like Nigerians know very much about Vietnam, so maybe that's fair. But yeah, no, it sounds like at least they were open and the reception was, people weren't put off as such, but maybe curious more than anything.
Yeah, very curious,
I'm
very,
gonna
very
I'm
curious.
gonna hand you off to OEG, who will do a speed round questions. So yeah, if you could, try to make it snappy because I know you also have to run. But very interesting responses so far.
Yeah,
OEG, take it
yeah,
away.
yeah. It's been nice listening to, experiences, all that, and in fact, you've touched on a part of the question that I'm going to ask now because you mentioned about countries bordering Vietnam, Hong Kong, China, all these places, and also, the markings of Western infiltration and capital. And in this global world or this globalization scheme and the context of neoliberalism generally, you mentioned Starbucks, McDonald's, all that, how would you rate, Vietnam's approach in dealing with these kind of things? Or are they fully open to it? Are they screening it out? Are they picking the good things and trashing the ones that might be counterproductive to their society? The entire socialist project of the country anyway, like to combat neoliberalism, what level would you put it at, from the things that you've seen?
Yeah, so just like I said earlier, I feel like to be very, very conclusive after like a 2 weeks visit would be very wrong. So I just want to, I'll just like talk about like the things that I saw and try to like draw like my conclusions from the things that I saw. So,
Fair enough.
so I feel like the strategy in Vietnam is based on the fact that there's this very big question. I was asking this big question to one of the guys that I was talking to, and it was like, oh, it was like for you to survive, especially in a world where you know there is so many reactionary figures trying to like upset things, because Vietnam has like they still have like people who want to go back to the days of the old. They have like their own share of like reactionary folks, mostly guys that live in guys that live in the West, trying to like upset things back home. So they say, oh, if you want to like survive there, you have to like play ball. You have to like play like so much politics, geopolitics, right? So there is something that happens there, and they were like willing to actually talk about was how the West tries to like pitch China and Vietnam against each other, and tries to like make them uh, sort of like competitors. right? So, and it's a very big thing there. It's a very big thing there. So, what I saw with regards to because not denying the fact there were so many elements of infiltration of like Western, Western capital. You found like the companies, you found like there was this particular place I went to, was like an industrial zone, and there was Benz there, there was Intel, there was HP, there was these are like companies that put like their plants, making something in like their own production chain right there in Vietnam, right? So they were there. So, but what I think was very, very crucial was how much they tried to like cement state authority. So, state authority is ultimate, right? In the sense that there was obviously very, very huge state control of like all of these things and how they actually run, right? Something very similar to how like, China tries to like run as well, with the very, very big state control of like the narrative, how like the economics run and how like investments are made, etc. Right? Because you could see the obvious like state presence, in the kinds of like in the kinds of like what do you call it? The kind of like narratives they wanted to like portray out to like the wider public, right? When you go to like certain areas, it's just very huge reference for what they were doing and how they were going to like do it, etc. So that was something that really, really stood out. But obviously, it still lies in the face of like the contradiction that we were talking about earlier, about how like these so-called socialist states are trying to like juxtapose um, aspects of like capitalism while trying to maintain, those sort of like socialist leanings, to a very large extent, right? So it still falls on that particular category. But there was also something that stood out. Just like I said, when you go more into like the rural areas, you found less of like the very huge, capitalist imagery, right? It was more of you entering spaces where you could see obvious government effort, which is in terms of like kind of like housing, social development, etc. Right? You could see like the obvious effort into trying to like revitalize those aspects of like the country. So, and they weren't doing it, it wasn't, they weren't doing it. They were doing it in a way that they wanted people to know that this is the government doing this thing. Because like I explained earlier, you see like huge banners of like states, then just right by the side, like a very huge hammer and sickle banner in front of like a very large housing complex, right? So those kinds of like imagery, obviously, it's a reminder to people who occupy those kind of spaces that the state is still the ultimate, power here, right? We're the ones still calling the shots here, and we'll do as much as possible to protect your interest, even though we also have to like allow some form of like reactionary forces to come and make money in our own society. So those were like the things that I saw, right? Those were the things that I saw, and it was not like a very, very big question for me with regards to like, because I was telling my friend was not like, okay, now that we have come to this is my friend that I said we should go to Vietnam. The guy was not like, okay, now that we have come to Vietnam and we have seen how people juxtapose like all of these ideas, I think our next trip should be like Cuba, so we can see a country
Yeah.
that is under embargo and that is under sanctions and doesn't have access to all of this infiltration of like Western capital, and see how they like organize like their own
Manage
societies.
that. Yeah.
I was not like, okay, that would be like a very, very good comparison for us to make. Let's plan towards that, right? So I feel like that was a very huge thing. So maybe those contradictions will be solved if you finally visit Havana, or we'll see
Yeah.
like another aspect of how like the socialist project is being implemented there. We're yet to see that. So yeah, that was some of the things that I saw.
Yeah. Personally, I feel that the capitalist world doesn't own development, and human advancement. So how we want to take the development or the advancement, or how we want to make it work for the people, will definitely be different from place to place. So we're not going to bow and say they are the ones that
Yeah,
own
they are the
development and
umpires
all
of
that.
development.
Nah. We'll take human advancement, we'll take technology and use it the way we want to use it, for the interest of the people. Yeah, so I'm sure that going there for like 2 weeks might not have exposed you to the length and breadth of the country, because that's like a short period of time, getting to know things and, the finer details and all that. And again, you mentioned that there's like a 5-year development project, all that, and I'm wondering that from the feeling, or what sense do you get from the inhabitants of the country or people from the country in terms of, countryside and, the urban areas, is there like a hope for the feel of the government or for the hand of the government to touch them? And if there's any stark contrast between the urban side and countryside in terms of access to social services like healthcare, let's say things like healthcare, if we're not going to have skyscrapers, all that in the countryside, do they have the basic things like transport, healthcare, and schools, all that,
Oh, yeah, that was also something that I really noticed as well, because this particular place that I went to like 3 places outside of like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. So I went to a place called Halong Bay. I went to this is like a UNESCO World Heritage site. So I was really keen on visiting that place. I went to Ninh Binh. Ninh Binh actually used to be like the old capital of Vietnam, but like this is like centuries ago. So they have like this very massive history, but now it's more of like a rural countryside. Then I went to like a place also, I can't remember the name right now. It's also on the outskirts of like Ho Chi Minh. So what stood out in these places was first, these places had like massive amount of like farming population, because you would see like rice fields, like just expanse of like rice fields up until where your eyes could reach. Right. So, but there was something that was very, very clear. Social services were, the roads leading to those places, the kind of like healthcare facilities that you see in those places, and the kind of like life generally that you see in those places. It wasn't because there's this thing that comes with like um neoliberal development. It tends to like abandon areas where there is no like where there is no excessive money to like extract from.
cover. Yeah.
Exactly. So if there is no incentive for us to make money off you, then you will not be caught up in our own development. That's the capitalist sense of things. So it has to take obvious, extra efforts of people in power to say, oh, even if we're going to like concentrate on building the skyscrapers and the big cities, we definitely have to like check, we have to check our flanks. But what I saw, just like I said earlier, was there's still this very huge government acceptance in like the rural areas. And this government acceptance is maintained by all of these social services that the government does in those areas. Things like those kinds of housing projects that are actually talked about in the rural areas. I know that's how like the government buys like soft power and influence in those areas. That's why, you know, even if like people in the city are becoming a lot more bourgeoisie and they are getting exposed to like the big trends and things, the government definitely knows that people in like the rural areas are still like soldiers in this particular fight, because they are the ones who are actually seeing like the direct benefits of what it means to actually enjoy governmental benefits. So they are seeing like things like subsidized or free housing, right? So this is like direct benefits, right? So these are a lot more different to things you experience in the city, which is more of like, oh, what is the benefit of me being here? They'll tell you, oh, it's the vibe, right? Like, the fact that you're here, that's the benefit. No, I want to see like actual material benefits. What does it mean for me to be here? Do I get like social housing? Do I get to like get subsidized food? All of those things, right? So it's not like when they say, oh, it's not like the Nigerian thing where they say, oh, what's the benefit? Oh, the benefit is trickle down. It's going to trickle down, right? When they say all those absurd, very tokenistic things, they say, oh, the benefit of this policy is the trickle down effect. So trickle down literally means I have to wait for the guys at the top to be very, very, benevolent and say, oh, let's share to the down, right? No, that's not it. I want to see like actual benefits. Am I getting this? Am I getting that? So I feel like that's one area that they have maintained in the countryside, but also in the city side as well. With what I saw, with where my hotel was located, my hotel is located right in front of like a party secretariat, and I saw
Mm,
how much people were still like very, very involved in like the local politics, right?
Yeah.
mm,
And I was like very, very happy to, because this was literally on the day I was leaving for the airport. So I could literally have missed that experience and I wouldn't be relaying it to you guys now. But I was very, very happy to like experience it. I was like, okay. Because every time I was always looking at that party secretary that when are you guys going to come for for the actual meeting? I'm waiting. But they never came. It was just like few bunch of like people just go in, go out. But that day looked like, a day that they had selected to like maybe carry out certain things or talk about certain things at like the party level within the community. So there was like massive amount of like people, from like all walks of life, literally. Like because people were like coming from like cars, people were driving on their scooters, people were just
Yeah.
like coming, everybody just coming and having like
And
massive, and they were doing it on the road, like right on the
I'm
road.
curious about
You know?
that issue actually. So the one interesting all works of life, but how about generations? Like, were there younger people there as well,
Oh
or
yeah, they were
did
they were
they
they were
feel
actually younger people. They were actually
okay?
younger people. They were actually
Right.
very, very younger people. I saw very young people in their
Mhm.
midst. Right.
Right.
So of course I saw like the old, the old guys, they have this thing in
Sure.
Vietnam where you see like some guys who are always wearing like khaki pants. They always wear
Yeah.
khaki pants and they wear like the cap. The cap has like the star sign. So I asked someone like, why do they wear this thing? He said, oh, the person is most likely like a veteran of the war.
Yeah. Sure.
And
mm,
yeah, he said the person is most likely the veteran of, or maybe they just like that dressing and they want to like align with, you know, they also want to feel part and they want to like,
Yeah.
because they say most people who are like veterans of war are getting older now, so you might not necessarily see them, but there are like still
Yeah.
certain some of them who, they hold on to that particular history and they're very, because Vietnamese are actually really, really proud of that particular thing that, oh, we beat the French, we beat the US, like
Sure.
it's very, very big for them. So
Yeah. No. Sure. Okay.
so I saw like so many of that there, like very huge. And also I saw women, right? I saw like women, like Vietnamese women as well. They were also part of like the proceedings that day. And I was like, man, if it's not that I have a flight, I'm myself go, I will literally enter this meeting and go and ask them what's going on. Right. Well, I had to like
Yeah.
catch a flight, so I had to like leave there. Right. So I saw that too in the city. This is literally in Ho Chi Minh. Right? So I saw that in the city as well. So to a very large extent, there was still those kinds of like preservations, right? So in a world where maybe things are about to like change and it's about to like go better for like comrades, I feel like they'll be like in a very, very good position to maintain like their own power structures and
Yeah.
just go with it like that, right? They won't have a problem with, oh, this is a very new idea that we're trying to like introduce to the people. No, it's not a very new idea. Everybody knows what's going on. Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Nice.
that's great. We have to kind of draw back and look at imperialist legacies. Of course, with the material, we can have impacts that might be long lasting on the mental and vice versa, that back and forth thing. And the war, the partition of the country and all that, to north and south during that time. Of course, the imperialists had their own side and the revolutionary communists had their own side, which was to the north and all, So with this visit that you went to, of course, the country unified Vietnam now after Dien Bien Phu, everything, you know, can do you kind of sense any form of mentality change or difference between people from the north or the south of that time, or during your interaction with people, do they still make any distinctions between these people, like between North and South, or the unified nation has prevailed over that
Oh, I think
partition?
the unified nation literally prevailed over, because I visited the War Remnant Museum, and
Yeah.
the place has like very interesting history. So when you move in, there was the thing about places. You talk to a tour guide who definitely is telling you things that is scripted. So of course, the tour guide will tell you things that make you, this is scripted stuff. So I don't expect you to tell me like things from your heart. But at the
Mm,
same time, you talk to like ordinary people, and and you're like, oh, and the first example is that, oh, we're actually very, very happy to like be united right now. So I visited Ho Chi Minh's, so the War Remnant Museum is in Ho Chi Minh, but Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum is in Hanoi. So both
Mm,
are like museums, and they literally say most likely have like the same kind of like vibe. So I visited like the
mm,
Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum first because I was in Hanoi first. So I was not talking to people. I was like, oh, like this guy, he fought the war and he like brought like the country together and very very nice stuff, etc. So there, right there, this was me talking to like other tourists, people that also came to actually see the mausoleum. This was like an American guy, like an Indian guy, and a guy that was Indian, but he was born and he grew up in Tokyo. So oh, the guy was not like, oh, this is very, very nice. And this is the guy that was born in Japan and he's born or he's Indian. So the guy was not like, oh, that if not for like Ho Chi Minh or if not for like the Vietnamese people, this will most likely be like another story of like South Korea and North Korea. And obviously it would be like very, very bad, right? Because it was just like divide like two people and they won't be able to like find like a common ground all of these years, just like we have now in North Korea and occupied occupied Korea. So when I got to Ho Chi Minh as well and got to like the War Remnant Museum, the tour guide also said like the same thing. I was like, they're very, very glad that the country's won now and they don't have like a Korean problem. That's what I called it. We don't have like a
mm,
Korean problem, right? We don't have like a Korean a Korean problem. And I was like, okay, so you guys use like the Korean thing to like make yourself feel good on all sides. I was like, okay, this is nice. This is nice, but but can you guys not make it so obvious that you guys literally say, oh, we don't have like the Korean thing here. Don't bring that stuff near us, that kind of thing. So there wasn't so much distinction, of the north and the south because Ho Chi Minh is literally in the south and Hanoi is in the north, and I was in both places. So there wasn't so much difference, in the reception, the kind of people, the kind of ideas, the kind of things. You enter like a store and all you have is just like a representation of the war, the triumph of like the Vietnamese people, and not necessarily like a section of like the Vietnamese people, etc. So you can see like the obvious efforts that they have made in terms of like the reunification of like the country. And it was very obvious because there wasn't any kind of like, I didn't see anything that was representative of the sectional aspects of like the country. I don't even think that kind of thing exists there anymore. But people would tell
mm,
you that there are certain things that actually make them a lot different, right? So because in Ho Chi Minh, for example, in Hanoi, for example, there is still like a very huge like remnant of like French legacy there, which is not very, very present in Ho Chi Minh. That's something that I saw. And I asked someone, the guy that drove me to Ninh Binh, and I asked him, and he was like, oh, the guy was like, oh, the reason why most of the French influence that you see in Hanoi is there is literally just to like appeal to like Western gaze. Is because Hanoi
mm,
is like very, very touristy, and this is what tourists want to see when they come. And that's why they still keep them there. That even the people don't really like, they don't care. They don't care. They don't care about like those things. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, so this is the cash cow. Yeah, let us have it. Let it go then. So because like Hanoi has like these old quarters, the old quarters is where you have like very high, very big French influence, but like the place is also like very touristy, and like you see like people go there just to like see the place, and it's just generally very very nice, very very nice. But I didn't
mm,
see like those kind of things when I went back to Ho Chi Minh. I felt like Ho Chi Minh had like more revolutionary intent, maybe because of like the name of the city, because everywhere you went to, it was like Ho Chi Minh everywhere, and there was like so many reverence to like the guy, and everybody loved Uncle Ho there. So
mm,
there wasn't so much of like there wasn't difference. Like I couldn't say that, oh, I'm in the north, so they are behaving like the north. No, I didn't. Like the entire time, I was like really, really looking out for it. Like I was very keen on seeing what would like differentiate these guys. Nah, but maybe also because I experienced Hanoi first before I went to Ho Chi Minh, where they didn't really do so much. Maybe if I experienced maybe Ho Chi Minh first, then go to Hanoi, maybe I could have cited like certain differences, right? But there wasn't so much. There wasn't. I didn't really see so much at all. Like there was
mm,
very, very huge. there was very, very huge effort towards like, reunification. And the war had, the war also, let's not forget that the war had ended a very, very long time, right? So, but I'm not saying that is why, even if you ended like Nigerian civil war also ended so many years ago, but we still deal with like so much tribalism and things, right?
Yeah.
So that's just to tell you that of course is as a result of like so much effort that has been put into trying to like bring like everybody together. Yeah.
That's great. I will hand you over to the third musketeer, Emeka, to
Okay.
ask for speech here. So
All right. I'm sorry I wasn't here at the start, but I've been listening to your narration of your sojourn
Yeah.
in Vietnam. And I guess that where I'd love to start is just to seek some sort of clarification, because I hear you use Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, and I'm a bit old school, so I think about Vietnam in terms of Hanoi and Saigon. I don't know if
Oh
that,
yeah.
that
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Saigon.
is Ho Chi Minh Saigon?
Yeah, Ho Chi Minh is Saigon.
All right, okay. And then for
Yeah,
the
Ho Chi Minh
benefit
is
of
Saigon.
our listeners, which of them is north and which of them is south? Which was
Yeah,
occupied and which
yeah. Hanoi is the north.
oh,
So
Hanoi is
Saigon is the south.
okay. All right,
Yeah.
okay, great. Okay, and then so my second
Emeka is trying to make this more boomer and Gen X inclusive, saving them
yeah
saving them that Google trip. Nice one.
yeah okay and so from listening to you, and this is by way of clarification as well. I get the sense that we're talking about a one-party state, right? Or
Yes,
am I
yes.
right? Oh, okay. And I guess that naturally leads me to the crux of my question. What does this mean for human rights? You know, uh, I mean, so let me take it. Let me rephrase. Given what you saw in terms of on the whole, economic development in Vietnam, both North and South, as a unified or reunified country, would you say that whatever development that you saw or that's beginning to happen now has come at the expense or in spite of the abuse of fundamental human rights? And I'm thinking about China here, in terms of how they developed, over the years, since they opened up, and essentially because it's also a one-party state. What would you say, in terms of human rights abuse? Is there a trade-off anywhere?
Can I quickly jump in and add maybe a component to that, which is maybe abuse is you can obviously talk about abuse if that's something you experience or such, but even the kind of everyday vibe of like free speech, do you feel like people could freely criticize the system and like engage with any aspect of their society critically, or did you feel like people maybe wanted to shy away, or didn't find that a comfortable topic? Obviously, language barrier also being a factor here. But yeah, I mean, so you can talk about the whole spectrum of that, from the question of abuse, even to just everyday vibe of like whether there was a bit of repression, the kind of repressive atmosphere, or whether it felt a little more open.
Oh, yeah. So a couple of things that I noticed, especially when I got there, and I was like talking to some guys that like I quickly made some friends there, and they were like, "Oh, that don't as somebody who just came around, like don't publicly like be criticizing like the Vietnamese government or like say like sensitive things about like the Vietnamese society in public."
Mm.
Right. So I'm like, okay, so what does that constitute? What aspects does that constitute? I was asking the person that what aspect does that constitute that can I like criticize that my road, the road leading to my hotel is bad? Or do I like criticize like the fact that this is a socialist country generally and this is bad? what is the extent of what is the extent of criticism that is admissible, and the one that is, oh, we've drawn the line here. You can't pass this mark, right? So, and he was like, he was telling me, he was like, oh, the people here, that first, because of like, and this is something, I feel like this is something that is like very, very peculiar to countries who have had to fight like some sort of like war for their own independence and freedom, etc. So, and they have like a one-party state. Of course, the party state tries as much as possible to leverage that particular history as a way of trying to like cement power, right? So they use that particular history, especially when they are the ones who actually like fought the war and they won the war, and now they are like the rulers, they are the leaders of like that particular society. They always want to like leverage those things. So the question is now, are they leveraging it for good, or they're just leveraging it for their own like personal benefits, right? So because if you look like, and this is something like very, very peculiar to those kind of like states, and this is not just like even states that are like socialist and things in like Southeast Asia. So because you could find like the same thing as well in places like, let's say, Singapore, the same thing as well in like Thailand, right? In, the same thing with, most of like the other countries within that particular region who kind of like have like, similar history. You have like this one person who's like the big savior of like the country, and they try to like use that particular narrative to cement power as much as possible. But what I experienced in Vietnam with regards to like the human rights thing within that particular short time was, just like I said earlier, of course, Vietnamese people won't just like start talking to you with politics, right? And this was like something very, very different that I saw with when I went to like some other countries. Because when I went to like Kenya, you enter like any cab, maybe because we both spoke English and we're both African, so they were like quickly easy to like jump into what's wrong with like our leaders. Everybody on the continent is messing up. They're trying to like share like their own experiences and wanting you to like share your own too, so we can bond over like the common problems that we have, right? So, but it wasn't the same over there. Because of the obvious language barrier, they most likely won't speak to you. And you also, because of the fact that you already know in your mind, there's an extent to criticism that I can make. You're not speaking to everybody, right? You're just speaking to like select people. So the entire time, I felt like I spoke about like politics to like 3 or 4 people, right? The entire time, and I had like more interaction with like people. Like I saw people in like bars, in like cafes, in like restaurants. I even went to like a school there where like some Stanford guy that I met, he was doing like a program there, so I went there as well. So, but we weren't having like so much of that kind of like conversation, right? So what I would say is I don't really have like extensive examples of maybe how they have employed, weaponized those aspects, human rights, etc. But with just the few occurrences, with the few examples that I have, of course, everybody was trying to like maintain some sort of like decorum, right? And nobody wanted to like move beyond, what was acceptable, right? So, and there's this thing about like Southeast Asians generally. They are very, very cautious people, and they're very, very respectful people, and it's like a very cultural thing for them. They're not the ones, they're not like very lousy, and they're not like very, very outward there trying to like, oh, we want to do like we're very crazy about like, nah. There's this particular very big respect for like process, right, and authority, right? But I don't think, but there's something that stood out. I don't think Vietnam is like a police state, because you weren't seeing like security apparatus like right in your face. Like, nah, you won't see that kind of thing. You won't see that kind of thing. Like, barely had like encounters with like police or like any security outfit. Nah, never. Like, barely. Maybe outside of like the airport, which is very obvious. You see like security at the airport. Yeah, barely. They don't have the concept of police checkpoints. They don't. They don't even have
I
this.
was going, I was going to, I was going to pop that question. So
They don't. They don't have. They don't have the. They don't
see
have.
roadblock.
Nah, they don't have the concept of police checkpoints. Like, it doesn't exist in their own society. That, oh, like police are on the road and they are stopping people checking. Nah, they don't. So, But what you will see many times will just be like in strategic areas, like maybe you go to like a public building. Because I actually visited a couple of public facilities, like the museum. I went to this big post office. To certain areas you will see, and again you see like bunch of like police stations, but there's nothing right in your face that, oh, this is us, we are like the the upholders of like the law and things. Now they don't have that.
No
They don't have
sirens, no
no
police
sirens, like
patrols.
no sirens, no police patrols, none of that. No, I didn't see any of that.
Oh,
I tried to like travel with my like I tried to like move from, because Vietnam is like this long stretch, it's not very big of a country in terms of like width, but it's like very, very long. So I tried to like move from like end to end of the country, trying to like
hmm.
experience these things. Like I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of that. But of course you find them in like most of these public buildings and things. You see them public
All
areas,
right.
full-blown, police state where you have blasting sirens, where you're like stopping, checking people, all those things. Nah, and they didn't have all of this.
Okay. That gives us an idea, say, I mean, if one was looking to compare that with perhaps China, for instance.
Oh
All right.
yeah, I feel like China is
Um,
more. I feel like China is more of like a surveillance society. They
yeah.
don't. Yeah, I didn't see all those things. I didn't see.
Okay. So my final question, yeah, would be, I mean, and it's off the back of something that I heard you say. I mean, not explicitly, but something that I was able to deduce from, part of your responses to some of the questions that my comrades had popped. It seems to me, and the sense that I get, and I'm saying this, maybe I'm trying to turn to AG here as well, is that Vietnam is not an out and out socialist state in that sense, at least not from the economic viewpoint. It would seem to me that what we're talking, I mean, that we're talking about a mixed economy, so it's something like, again, I hate to do this, but with reference to China, on the political spectrum, a socialist project, but on the economic side, it's a market-based economy. I mean, that's the feeling that I get, and I might be wrong. But in view of all of this, presume if assuming that I'm right, in view of this, what would you, as a visitor, say that Nigeria left perhaps can learn from the Vietnamese project as perhaps a way of getting into power. Perhaps maybe the backdrop of what I'm talking about stems from the kind of critique that somebody like Peter Obi got during the last elections, trying to hijack what is presumably a left platform for, if you like, neoliberal politics.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I saw that I feel like can be like it could be a rallying point for leftists on the continent and in Nigeria as well. First is that grassroots thing. I think it's grossly missing out in the kind of like leftist politics that we play here. Largely because
Touche, touche.
of course, those that can implement those kind of things have now gone very, very neoliberal now, sadly, because you would expect that parties like the Labour Party, for example, are the ones who will be like at the forefront of these kinds of like grassroots mobilization and trying to like incentivize political education, at the grassroots level, trying to like bring people to like a common goal. But that's not the case, right? But with the couple of experiences that I saw, outside there in Vietnam, the party, right, still reigns supreme. And the people are still very adherent to like the tenets of the party, right? And they are still in line with what the party says, and they have like so much loyalty to the party. especially from like the from like the things I saw in the rural areas, and also the aspects of like the party meetings that I saw, when I came back to like the city, right? So this is something that is very largely very non-existent on this side of the world. Of course, it's going to take so much time for us to like build, trust, momentum, try to like, do all of those things within the particular political sphere.
Yeah, especially without the war of liberation to make us look good.
Exactly. So that's something. And
The
again,
irony, sorry to interject, the irony, if I might add, is that you know the 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 parties, ideologically, that don't even lean towards the left have managed to kind of
Yeah. That's who does it more effectively.
yeah.
As some recent political science theses have argued. But anyway, yep.
So that's on one side. Another thing that I feel like was very, very evident in that particular society was there is this consensus on the knowledge of their history and how it defines them today, right? So I don't think anybody in Vietnam is saying, oh, what the US did was right, we deserved it, or they should do it again. the way the way you find like reactionary elements in Nigeria sometimes try to like whitewash, colonialism and maybe slavery, all of those things. Especially when you have like folks with like very huge platforms trying to like rationalize these things. Like a couple of days ago, there was this very popular pastor that was making rounds when I don't know if you guys saw like the video when he was trying to like rationalize, he was trying to like draw like a link between Christianity and the kind of development that we have right now. I don't know if you guys saw that video.
Yeah, good.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
Yeah, we should go to the lecture.
Yeah. Chionguti had like this large reporter, like he was coming for the guy. So there's this. I feel like as a society, there should be this consensus about our history and how it shapes us today. Because I feel like we will not make any progress if we can't make like simple concessions like, bro, imperialism and colonialism was bad. And we have to like live with that particular truth and move on from it, definitely. But we have to make that particular acknowledgement, right? Of course, like the Vietnamese people have tried to like build like their societies after all of those atrocities that happened to them. All of these atrocities are literally less than 50 years ago, right? When you're talking about like history, 50 years is obviously a very, very long time. But like when you're talking about like history and societal development, 50 years is just back here. Like it's not that much of a long history, right? They've achieved so much in terms of like development of their society in that very, very short span of time, right? But you're not trying to like lecture them about like the things that happened and try to like rationalize all of those things in a way that you want to absolve them of, the responsibilities. They know their own responsibilities as a people, but also they don't want you to run away from the guilt of what has been done to them. This is like very, very crucial, right? Because I feel like this is because societies need like a base upon which they actually concentrate the efforts to like develop, right? For the Vietnamese society, I think the rallying point for the most of them is this thing has happened to us. It's a very bad chapter in our history, but we'll move on from it, but we'll not forget it. Because this is the rallying point that shapes us, and it is the boost that would allow us do things because we don't want a repeat of this particular history, right? And this is something you see in most of these countries who have made some sort of like progress. If you look at like China, for example, if you look at like North Korea, if you look at like Cuba, for example, they use this particular aspect of like their history. They use it as like a rallying point to like spur themselves into like some kind of like growth, some kind of like niche growth, right? So you can't say, of course, everybody knows that, oh, the embargo on Cuba is like very, very bad. It's wrong. It is not, it's not legal. It is, very bad, shutting them off for the world, etc. Of course, they're still doing their own things within their own societies, trying to like still alleviate like their own people and help their own people, the giant strides that they've made in things like healthcare, and how they have persevered this long to actually maintain like their society, etc. They put in the work, right? They know they have to put in the work, right? Nigerians know they have to put in the work to actually build like their society. But at the same time, we cannot deny the fact that this is where it went wrong. And for us to actually get it right, we have to like keep some things at the back of our mind so we don't make the same mistakes that we made, earlier. We don't make the mistakes that we made. So all of those things, that we might want to like term like indoctrination, we might want to term like, oh, we're trying to like, because people feel like when you talk about all of those things, you're trying to like you're trying to like absorb like the local people of like responsibilities and like their own culpability in all of the things that are happening. But no, we are saying that this could be like a rallying point for all of us to actually come together to achieve like a common goal, right? Because this is what happens like in all of these other places as well, right? The history is known, the history is taught. So everybody knows that when you get to like certain aspects of like society, when you get to like certain posts in society, you're not just fumbling the bag. You know that this is like the history that we are trying to like preserve. You know the occurrence that we are trying not to repeat itself. But we don't have all of those in Nigeria. And it's for like obvious reasons, right? Because the current polity, it serves like the elite base, it serves the elite class. The lack of revolutionary consciousness on the part of the people, it serves like their own, selfish interests. So they're not interested in doing any of those things. Because of course, when people start like interrogating those things, it's definitely the hammer is going to hammer them as well. Like the effect of that is going to trickle down to their own possible demise or to their own possible, unpopularity in the community. So that's one thing I feel like Nigerian left and African left generally can actually also take, very good note of,
I
right?
I hear you. I hear you. But I don't know if it's as cut and dry as that. Regardless, if we go into that, we'll spend. I mean, we'll spend the whole day. My very quick response to that would be to say that the Vietnamese history is perhaps a little bit different from the Nigerian history. I mean, and that's me not wanting to go deep into it. And that's where I'd like to sound off, on this. I don't know if Saeed or Oeti has um, anything to add, to your last intervention. But I mean, I think that it's, I mean, as a way of response, by way of response, I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. I think that the people who've done the work in Nigeria but there's something about the history itself, the way of this consciousness that we speak of. I guess that's where I'd leave it.
Yeah. Oh, well, like what I would just add is that, of course, the development of Nigeria and its advancement towards this degradation of revolutionary consciousness. If it was like in Vietnam, at least there's an upward build to revolutionary consciousness. Nigeria, there's a downward, in fact, a very steep downward slope towards, the destruction, the removal of revolutionary consciousness. I don't know. So that's what makes the contributions of the people of the past that had revolutionary approaches, revolutionary solutions, or ways of painting how, we could move in an alternative fashion in Nigeria. That's why we barely hear anything from them, and it's all in the material, decline of how Nigeria has gone from the path where we had the hope of getting something concrete, and you fast forward 60 something years, you'll be hard pressed to hear anything about spy module anywhere or any of the revolutionary leaders or even socialist projects in Nigeria. So that's what I would liken or attribute it to. That Vietnam's history is at least moving towards an upward revolutionary cycle, and Nigeria has just been declining over the years. So that's what I would put it on.
Well, yeah, I guess I would say all of these contributions further evidence that we definitely need to do more work to dig out the history of the left and revolution in Africa, and also to engage with ourselves as contemporary radicals, revolutionaries, etc. Even if in sometimes more lighthearted formats, which has been the objective here today. And I think that with the aid of this very interesting travel narrative, we have had a bit of a chance to do that. So for that, I would want to say a huge thank you again to Taofeek. Maybe a final question would be, would you go back to Vietnam?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Nice. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. The plan is to see the plan is to interact with so many cultures as much as possible, and
Yeah.
to see how like people are building their lives, in this particular very, very, because the world can get toxic, right?
For sure.
You can get like very, very absorbed, like so many, stories of like the world, seeing things. But I feel like interaction with people literally change like your perspective of the world. Like when you
I
see
agree.
like how people in their most ordinary sense, build like their societies, what their goals are, what the things that they are doing, what they hold dear to them as like their own yardstick of like success, it kind of like changes your perspective. And you just like when you because I saw like people there who obviously they weren't even like these people, I don't know. I was telling somebody that it's like our own aspiration is too much. Because these were like the most ordinary people trying to like just live out their lives, doing like the most basic thing. And it was a very, very good atmosphere, right? They were just there, trying to like do their thing, and you just appreciate the fact that you are like, in that particular area at that particular point where you can interact with those kinds of people. So I think this is something, and I feel like for us, like comrades particularly, we need to also like interact more with like people who are not like from our own like domain, so we can like see the world,
Yeah.
from like other perspectives, right? So because it also engages like our own dogma as well, it engages like our own, what do you call it? Principles. We see like
Yeah.
contradiction. We see like things that support our case. We see like things that make us rethink our position, and it is good because it kind of like keeps you on your feet, and you're like, okay, this is something worthwhile, and we should keep going on like this, right? So that's how I see it, and just general like interaction with like other people from like other places is always like a very, very win-win situation all the time. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. I sincerely
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think
You
that's a
should
Yeah.
be
good
the
place
one
to leave
thanking
it.
you, man.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
agreed. So definitely come back to the show at some point if you'd be happy
Yeah,
to
if you go to Cuba,
either after your next
let's
trip
hear
or
from you.
even before.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
we're trying to like see if we can get to Cuba this year.
Nice.
Yeah, because our constraints before has been like, how do we get there and things. But I just realized now that I think there is, what's the name of this guy? Turkish Air now flies to
I was just
Cuba.
gonna say, yeah, Turkish
Yeah,
Airlines.
so
Yeah.
we can.
Nice.
If we go there, we'll definitely will be on this podcast again. Because I feel like that would be a lot more interesting experience than even Vietnam.
Nah, I mean, we
Yeah,
definitely look
definitely.
forward.
Yeah,
Look
and
forward to
now
talking
I'll
about
be
it.
like very, very particular about like trying to like see certain
Things to look
things.
out for, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, quick one. How long Vietnamese trip,
How
or
what?
was it rather? How long was the Vietnamese trip in terms of?
Oh, I traveled via Ethiopian Air, so you have to get to Addis Ababa first.
Okay.
So Nigeria to Addis Ababa is like 5 hours.
Mhm.
Then you take like a 9 hour flight from Addis Ababa to Singapore. Then like 1 hour to Vietnam from Singapore.
Nice.
So cumulatively, that's like 15 hours. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 15 hours.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, America, we should still try to stick to our plan of recording this weekend. Don't go to Vietnam yet. I know you're looking
I
at
they go
flights
find
right now.
I they go find cashew.
Let's go and do some business deals.
Are you guys in Lagos?
It's a bit.
It's
Oh, actually,
scattered all
nobody's in
around.
Lagos right now. Yeah.
Oh, no one's in Lagos now. Oh,
Lagos
okay.
was our initial base.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, okay.
Been
I don't know if
scattered
any of you like
slowed.
any of you guys come around, I brought like some what do you call it? Like
Souvenirs,
like
right?
souvenirs, yeah, that I could give you
Yeah.
guys. So
Oh shit, that would be
Yeah.
nice, man. I'll be looking for the
Now
Red
go hold
Star
you to
hat.
that one.
yeah, hold it to it.
Nice.
They see me post souvenir come now. You know,
I did tell you.
yeah, so go post that. We'll go give you address. Go post that.
No,
That's
Alan.
cool.
No
Yeah,
problem.
but
Then
anyway,
then I wanted to add to, like, if you have a picture of yourself in this thing, we might use
definitely.
it for a cover for the
Yeah, or any iconic
any
images,
iconic place, images, something like that.
Oh yeah, sure. I took one with the Ho Chi Minh background.
Nice,
Yeah, that
nice.
would be nice.
Me, I would particularly enjoy the one with the where Ho Chi Minh against the mall. But yeah, if you